The rain was relentless that night, a steady downpour drumming against the rooftops of the quiet Okinawan village. The air was thick with the scent of the ocean, and a mist curled through the narrow streets, swallowing the glow of the streetlights. Lance Corporal Daniel Hayes pulled his jacket tighter around himself as he hurried back to base. He had stayed out later than he should have again. A few drinks with his buddies had turned into a long night at the local izakaya, and now he was paying for it, walking alone through the deserted streets. It was nearly midnight, and the only sound was the distant crashing of waves and the occasional rustle of palm trees swaying in the wind. His boots splashed through puddles as he took a shortcut through an old alley, trying to shave a few minutes off his trip back. Okinawa was safe, or so they said. The real dangers weren't in the streets. They were out in the open sea or buried in the jungles where remnants of the past still lay undisturbed. But then he saw her. At first, she was just a shape in the distance, barely visible through the mist. A woman standing in the middle of the road, motionless. She was dressed in white, her long black hair hanging down past her shoulders, dripping with rain. Something about her posture made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. She wasn't moving. She wasn't even shivering despite the cold wind that cut through the night. Daniel slowed his pace, suddenly aware of how alone he was. His training kicked in. Assess the situation, determine the threat level. A woman, alone, in the middle of the street in this kind of weather. Didn't make sense. Maybe she needed help. Maybe she was lost. He cleared his throat, forcing his voice to be steady. "Hey ma'am, are you okay?" No response. The woman just stood there, her head tilted slightly downward, as if she were staring at the ground. The dim streetlights flickered, casting shadows across her face. A strange chill crept up Daniel's spine. He took a cautious step forward, lifting his hand slightly in what he hoped was a non-threatening gesture. "Do you need help?" The woman's head twitched. Not a normal human movement, something jerky, unnatural. Then, slowly, she lifted her face. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Her eyes, black, empty like bottomless pits, locked onto his. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the streetlights. Her lips didn't move, but he swore he heard something, a whisper barely audible over the rain. "Run." The word wasn't spoken. It was in his head, crawling through his mind like cold fingers down his spine. His body locked up, every instinct screaming at him to move, to get away, but his feet wouldn't listen. Then she took a step toward him. Daniel's pulse exploded. His training, his instincts, none of it mattered anymore. He turned and ran. Behind him, the sound of footsteps, light, too light, as if she weren't touching the ground at all, followed him. He didn't dare look back. He sprinted toward the base, toward the lights, toward safety. His breath came in ragged gasps, his boots slamming against the wet pavement. The gate was close, so close. Then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, the footsteps stopped. Daniel reached the entrance of the base, his hands shaking as he fumbled for his ID. The guard on duty raised an eyebrow at him. "You good, Hayes?" Daniel turned, his heart still hammering in his chest. The street behind him was empty. No sign of the woman. No sign of anything at all. But he knew what he had seen. And he knew, deep in his gut, that this wasn't over. Daniel barely slept that night. Even under the fluorescent lights of the barracks, with other Marines snoring in their bunks. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being watched. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, standing in the rain, her face pale and lifeless, her eyes like black holes that seemed to pull him in. He kept telling himself that it had to be some kind of trick. Maybe he was just exhausted. Maybe it was a local playing some weird prank on foreigners. But deep down he knew better. The next morning he was quieter than usual. At breakfast, he barely touched his food, pushing his scrambled eggs around his plate while his squadmates talked and laughed. "Yo, Hayes," Corporal Jennings nudged him. "You look like you saw a ghost." Daniel flinched. Jennings smirked. "What you did?" The guys chuckled, but Daniel didn't join in. He wanted to say something, to tell them what happened, but he hesitated. Sounded crazy. He could already hear the jokes they'd make, calling him paranoid, saying he had too much to drink. So he just shook his head. Didn't sleep well, that's all. Jennings shrugged and went back to eating. But across the table, another Marine was watching him. Sergeant Ito. Unlike the others, Ito wasn't laughing. He was staring at Daniel with an unreadable expression, like he already knew something. After breakfast, as Daniel was heading outside, Ito caught up to him. "You saw something last night, didn't you?" Daniel stopped. "What?" Ito crossed his arms. "Don't play dumb. I saw your face when Jennings joked about ghosts." Daniel hesitated. "I don't know what I saw." Ito studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "A woman. White dress. Long black hair." Daniel's stomach dropped. "How do you? You're not the first." The words sent a chill through Daniel's entire body. He swallowed hard. "Who is she?" Ito glanced around, lowering his voice. "Not here. Come with me." Daniel followed him off base, into a small coffee shop near the gate. It was quiet, just a few locals sipping tea and reading newspapers. They took a corner booth, away from prying ears. Ito leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "How much do you know about Okinawa's history?" Daniel frowned. "A little. The war. The battles." Ito nodded. "A lot of blood was spilled here. But it's not just about soldiers. Civilians suffered too. And sometimes the dead don't stay quiet." Daniel felt an uneasy knot form in his stomach. "She's been seen for decades," Ito continued. "Always at night. Always alone. A woman in white. Some say she's looking for something, or someone." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Has anyone ever?" He stopped himself. He didn't want to say the word. Ito didn't need him to. "Disappeared." He nodded. "There are stories. People who saw her and were never the same. Some got sick. Some left Okinawa and refused to talk about it. A few. Well, they were just gone." Daniel's hands clenched into fists under the table. "That's impossible." Ito gave him a hard look. "Is it?" Daniel wanted to argue. Wanted to say ghosts weren't real. But the memory of last night, the way the air had felt heavy, the way his body had screamed at him to run, was too fresh. "I don't know what she wants," Ito said. "But if you ever see her again, don't stop. Don't speak. And whatever you do, don't let her get close." Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. He didn't want to believe any of this. But a deep part of him already did. That night, as he lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The air felt different. Heavy. Like something was waiting. And then, just as he was drifting off to sleep, he heard it. A whisper. Right outside his window. His blood turned to ice. Slowly, heart pounding, he turned his head. The window was fogged up, the outside world barely visible through the glass. But there, just faintly, was the shape of a handprint. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Then, in the dim glow of the barracks light, he saw it. A single black strand of hair stuck to the glass. She had found him. And she wasn't going away. Daniel's breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. He couldn't look away from the window. The handprint was still there, the smudge of fingers barely visible in the dim light. The strand of hair clung to the glass like it had been placed there on purpose. His entire body screamed at him to move, to wake someone up, to do something. Anything, but he couldn't. He lay frozen, ears straining for any sound beyond the steady hum of the barracks. Nothing. The whisper he had heard just moments ago was gone, swallowed by the silence. But the feeling in the air remained, thick and suffocating. He wasn't alone. He forced himself to move, throwing the blanket off and stepping onto the cold floor. His hands shook as he reached for the curtain, hesitating before pulling it closed in one sharp motion. He didn't want to see. He didn't want to know if she was still out there. For the rest of the night, he sat on his bed, wide awake, listening to the silence. The next morning, Exhaustion weighed on him like a heavy fog. He went through the motions, shower, uniform, formation, but everything felt distant, like he was watching himself from outside his own body. No one else seemed to notice anything strange. The guys joked and talked like it was just another day. Except Ito. He caught Daniel's eye during roll call, and his expression told him everything. He knew. After formation, Ito pulled him aside. It happened again, didn't it? Daniel exhaled shakily. I didn't see her, but something was there. He swallowed. She left a handprint on my window. Ito's jaw tightened. That means she's getting closer. Daniel shook his head. This is crazy. I don't even believe in this stuff. Ito didn't argue. Instead, he pulled something out of his pocket and pressed it into Daniel's hand. A small, worn charm, faded with age. Keep this on you, Ito said. It won't stop her, but it might slow her down. Daniel turned the charm over in his palm. It was a small, circular piece of cloth with strange markings stitched into it. He didn't recognize the symbols, but they felt old. Important. What is it? A protection charm. My grandmother gave it to me before I joined the Corps. Ito's voice was steady, but there was something in his eyes, something haunted. She used to tell stories about the woman in white. Said she was looking for something she lost a long time ago. Daniel gripped the charm tighter. Like what? Ito hesitated. No one really knows. Some say she was a widow, waiting for her husband to come home from war. Others say she lost a child and wanders the island searching for him. His voice lowered. And some say she was betrayed. That she calls out to men at night, waiting for them to follow her, so she can take them. Daniel shuddered. He thought of the whisper he had heard, the way his body had refused to move. What would have happened if he had opened the window? If he had stepped outside? Ito clapped a hand on his shoulder. Don't go anywhere alone after dark. And if you see her again, don't answer. For the rest of the day, Daniel couldn't shake the weight in his chest. Every shadow felt deeper. Every quiet moment stretched too long. He kept the charm in his pocket, running his fingers over it absent-mindedly, as if making sure it was still there. That night he didn't sleep. He lay in his bunk listening, waiting. The hours dragged. Midnight passed. Then 1. Then 2. Nothing. Maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had happened the night before was a one-time thing. Then, just as he was beginning to drift off, a soft sound reached him. His eyes snapped open. It was coming from the window. Slowly, every muscle in his body tensed. He turned his head just enough to see. The curtain was still closed, but behind it something was moving. A shadow shifting against the fabric, swaying ever so slightly. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He squeezed his eyes shut, gripping the charm like a lifeline. Don't look. Don't move. Don't answer. The tapping stopped. Silence. For several agonizing minutes, he didn't breathe. Then, just as he thought it was over, a whisper slid through the air, soft and sweet, just outside the glass. Daniel! His blood turned to ice. She knew his name. Daniel's breath stopped in his throat. The voice outside the window was soft, almost gentle, but it made his entire body seize with cold terror. He wanted to believe he had imagined it, that exhaustion was playing tricks on him, but deep down he knew better. She knew his name. The silence stretched. The only sound was the distant hum of the barracks, the quiet rustling of sheets as other Marines slept, unaware. Daniel didn't move, didn't breathe. The handle of the window rattled. It wasn't loud, just a slow, deliberate movement. Test. A shiver ran down his spine. She was trying to get in. Daniel gripped the charm in his pocket so hard his knuckles ached. His mind raced. The barracks were locked at night. She shouldn't be able to get in. She shouldn't even be able to touch the window, but the handle rattled again. Harder this time. His stomach clenched. If she got inside, he knew, without a doubt, he wouldn't make it to morning. He shut his eyes. Stay still. Stay silent. Long pause. A single, drawn-out knock against the glass. The whisper came again, so close now it was almost inside his head. Daniel, open the window. His pulse hammered. His throat was dry. She was right there, just inches away. He could feel her presence, heavy and suffocating, pressing against the thin barrier of glass. The air around him felt wrong, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in an instant. His fingers ached with cold, and even the sound of his own heartbeat seemed muffled. He wanted to run, wanted to scream, but he couldn't. He was trapped, caught between fear and the awful, impossible pull of that voice. A shadow moved beneath the curtain. Daniel's body locked up. He had made a mistake. He had looked. For the briefest second, the dim light from outside outlined the shape behind the curtain. A woman, tall and thin, hair hanging in damp strands past her shoulders. Her face was hidden, but she was there, standing just beyond the glass. Watching him. Waiting. Then something worse. The curtain began to move. Not like it was being blown by the wind. Not like someone had brushed past it. It was deliberate. A slow, creeping motion, as if unseen fingers were curling around the fabric, pulling it aside inch by inch. She was revealing herself. Daniel's breath came in quick, panicked gasps. His instincts screamed at him to move, to run, to do anything but sit there frozen in his bunk. Then, just as the curtain shifted far enough to see, the door burst open. Light flooded the room. Daniel jerked, heart slamming into his ribs. Ito stood in the doorway, his face tight with urgency. Get up! Daniel didn't hesitate. He scrambled out of bed, nearly tripping over himself in his desperation to get away from the window. He didn't dare look back. Ito grabbed his arm and dragged him into the hallway. The moment they were outside the room, the tension in the air snapped like a rubber band. The heaviness lifted. The cold was gone. Daniel sucked in deep, shaking breaths, barely able to stand. Ito didn't let go. She's not done with you. Daniel looked at him, eyes wild. She knew my name. Ito's jaw clenched. Then we don't have much time. Daniel swallowed hard, trying to steady himself, but the truth settled deep in his bones. She wasn't just haunting him. She was coming for him. Daniel's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Even as Ito pulled him down the dimly lit hallway, even as the barracks filled with the distant murmur of sleeping Marines. His body refused to let go of the terror still gripping his chest. His mind kept replaying the moment the curtain began to move, the whisper curling around his name like a cold breath against his skin. She had been so close. Ito didn't say a word as he led Daniel outside. The air was thick with humidity, but Daniel still felt cold, like something unseen had slipped beneath his skin. They walked past the barracks, past the mess hall, past the perimeter of the base until they reached a quiet spot near the fence. Beyond it, the dark outline of trees swayed in the night breeze. Ito finally turned, his face grim. She's chosen you. Daniel's stomach twisted. What does that mean? Ito exhaled sharply. It means she's not going to stop. He glanced around as if making sure no one else was listening. There's something you need to know. Something I didn't tell you before. Daniel's heart pounded. What? Ito hesitated, then lowered his voice. You're not the first Marine she's followed. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. What? Ito's expression darkened. There was another. A lance corporal back in '09. Same thing happened. He saw her. She whispered his name. And then... He trailed off, his jaw tightening. Daniel swallowed hard. And then what? Ito's eyes locked onto his. He disappeared. The words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. What do you mean, disappeared? Ito shook his head. No one knows. One night he was here. The next he wasn't. His bunk was empty. His things were still there. No sign of him anywhere on base. They searched the whole island. Nothing. He paused. No body. No trace. Daniel felt lightheaded. You think she took him? Ito didn't answer right away. Then finally he said, I think he listened to her. The weight of those words pressed down on Daniel's chest. She's not a ghost, Hayes. Ito's voice was low, urgent. She's something older. Something worse. Daniel ran a hand over his face, trying to process everything. So what do I do? Ito exhaled. You leave. Daniel blinked. What? You put in for a transfer, get stationed somewhere else. Get off this island. Ito's face was serious. That's the only way. Daniel shook his head. I can't just run. Ito's jaw clenched. Then she won't stop. Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but then, sound, faint, just beyond the fence. A whisper. His blood ran cold. He turned, his heart hammering against his ribs. The trees swayed gently in the wind, their dark shapes shifting against the night sky. For a moment there was nothing. No movement, no sound, just the rustling of leaves. A flicker of white between the trees. Daniel's breath caught. She was there, standing just beyond the fence, half hidden in the darkness, watching, waiting. The night air pressed against his skin, thick and heavy. The world seemed to slow, every sound distant and muffled. Then, in a voice barely above a breath, Daniel! Ito grabbed his arm. Don't listen. But Daniel couldn't move, couldn't breathe, 'cause this time something was different. She wasn't alone. Standing just behind her, barely visible in the shadows, was another figure, man. And somehow deep in his bones Daniel knew. The missing Marine from '09. Daniel's body locked up, every muscle frozen in place. His breath came in short, shallow bursts as his eyes stayed locked on the shadowy figure standing behind her. The missing Marine. His face was barely visible in the darkness, but there was no mistaking it. The hollow stare, the slack jaw, the unnatural stillness. He wasn't just standing there. He was waiting. A chill crawled up Daniel's spine. The woman in white didn't move, but the air around her seemed to shift, growing heavier, pressing against him like an unseen force. Then, slowly, she lifted a hand, her fingers pale against the night. She was reaching for him. Daniel! The whisper curled through the air, soft and beckoning. A shudder ran through his body. Something inside him pulled, like an invisible thread wrapped around his ribs, tightening, dragging him forward. He wanted to move. Wanted to step toward her. For just a moment it felt right. Daniel, stop! Ito's grip on his arm was like a vice, yanking him back so hard it sent a jolt of pain through his shoulder. The moment snapped. The pull vanished. Daniel stumbled, gasping like he had just surfaced from underwater. Ito shoved something into his hand. His grandmother's charm. Hold on to it, he said, his voice urgent. Don't let her take you. Daniel's fingers curled around the cloth. The woman's hand slowly lowered, her head tilting ever so slightly. And then, she smiled. It was barely there, just the smallest curve of her lips. But it was enough. She knew. She wasn't finished with him. The whisper came again, softer now, almost playful. I'll see you soon. Then, as if the darkness itself swallowed her whole, she was gone. The figure behind her disappeared with her. The trees stood still. The night returned to silence. Daniel's entire body sagged. His breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. His heart pounding so hard it hurt. Ito didn't let go of his arm. We're getting you off this island. Daniel didn't argue. 2 weeks later he was gone. His transfer request had been approved faster than he expected. Almost too fast, like someone had been waiting for him to ask. Maybe someone else knew. Maybe others had seen her before. He didn't ask. He didn't want to know. The flight out of Okinawa was quiet. The moment the island disappeared beneath the clouds, a weight lifted from his chest. He told himself it was over. That night, in his new barracks on the other side of the world, he slept for the first time in weeks. And then, just before dawn, A whisper, soft and sweet, curled through the still air. Daniel! Daniel's eyes snapped open. His chest rose and fell in quick, uneven breaths as he lay motionless in the unfamiliar barracks, his heart slamming against his ribs. The air was still. The room was quiet. But the whisper, it had been real. His mind screamed at him to move, to check the corners, to make sure she wasn't there. But he couldn't. His body felt like it was sinking into the mattress, paralyzed by the crushing weight of fear. For a long moment nothing happened. No shadows shifted. No curtains swayed. No pale hand reached for him. He wasn't in Okinawa anymore. She couldn't be here. Right. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. His fingers trembled as they reached for his pocket. The charm Ito had given him was still there, its worn fabric pressed against his palm. His pulse slowed just a little. Maybe it was just a dream. Maybe his mind was still tangled in the nightmares of Okinawa, replaying the fear over and over like a broken record. He let out a long, unsteady breath. It was over. Had to be. The days passed in a blur. The new base was quieter, more isolated, and Daniel kept his head down, throwing himself into training, into routine. Anything to keep his mind from wandering back to that night, to the whisper that followed him across the ocean. First he thought he was free. Then the small things started happening. A flicker of white at the edge of his vision. The feeling of being watched when no one was there. A whisper, so faint, so distant. He almost convinced himself he had imagined it. Almost. One evening after a long shift, Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his tired eyes. His bunkmate, Alvarez, was talking about weekend plans, something about heading into town, but Daniel barely listened. His thoughts felt distant, fogged over by exhaustion. Then Alvarez's voice cut through the haze. "Dude, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Daniel stiffened. The words hit harder than they should have. He forced a tired smile. "Just a rough week." Alvarez shrugged. "Yeah, no kidding. You were talking in your sleep last night, man. Sounded like you were arguing with someone." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What did I say?" Alvarez frowned, trying to remember. "I don't know, something about a window. And a woman." He laughed, shaking his head. "Creepy as hell, though." Daniel didn't laugh. His hands clenched into fists, his nails digging into his palms. He hadn't spoken about her since leaving Okinawa. Hadn't dared to say her name, to acknowledge her existence. But somehow she was still here, still waiting. That night he didn't sleep. He sat awake, listening to the quiet hum of the barracks, watching the shadows stretch and shift across the walls. Hours passed and nothing happened. No whispers. No movement. Maybe it really had been a dream. Maybe his mind was just playing tricks on him. Then just before dawn, soft creak. His breath hitched. The window. Slowly, painfully, Daniel turned his head. It was closed. Just as he had left it. But there, pressed against the glass, was the faint outline of a hand. Not on the inside. On the outside. Daniel's entire body went cold. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. The hand stayed there for what felt like an eternity, unmoving, fingers splayed against the glass. Then, just as the first light of morning broke through the horizon, faded, like it had never been there at all. Daniel exhaled shakily, his entire body trembling. He didn't know what to do, didn't know how to fight something that wasn't supposed to exist. All he knew was that running hadn't saved him. She had found him once. She would find him again. Days turned into weeks, and the fear settled deep into his bones. He never spoke of her, never acknowledged the whispers, the flickers of white at the edge of his vision. He ignored the feeling of unseen eyes watching him, the cold that lingered in his room no matter how warm the night was, because deep down he understood. She wasn't something that could be escaped. She wasn't bound to Okinawa. She was bound to him. And no matter where he ran, no matter how far, she would always follow,